I am Kim Tracy of the Maxwell James Agency. Our intention is to connect phenomenal speakers with corporate events, trade shows, seminars, workshops, as well as conferences and training opportunities. Our guest today is Julie Chance with Action Strategies by Design out of Dallas, Texas. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Kim. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, for the viewers, this is our second blab, but for the viewers who are not familiar with you yet, can you let us know a little bit about yourself as well as what your company does?
Well, I live in Dallas, Texas. I have been here for about, I've been in Texas for over 35 years, going on 30 years, something like that. So a while. Grew up in Colorado and Louisiana, so have kind of lived in a lot of different cultures and really experienced a lot of change in my life. It's quite a change to move from the prairie or the prairie's not the right word. What do you call that? Northeast part of Colorado?
Plain. I call it the middle of nowhere.
The eastern plains of Colorado to the bayou country of Louisiana as a junior high student is quite a change. So maybe that's where, and quite a change for my parents, a cultural change for them as well. So maybe that's where I got my real interest and love in change and leading change and working with managers for change.
And you've lived in quite a few places in Texas, haven't you? Wasn't it like 3 to 4 different locations?
I lived in Austin, San Antonio, and then Dallas. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And Dallas is where you've actually lived the longest, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Dallas is the place I've lived the longest of anywhere in my life. It'll be 22 years this summer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's okay, viewers. She's still a Bronco fan, so we can't hold this Texas thing against her. So
we may have
today
some Texas viewers, so
we better have some Texas viewers. You know, there's 7 of them down here who should be watching this. So we are going to be talking about stop trying to manage change and start leading it. Is this something that you come across with your clients, with your colleagues, on a regular basis?
Well, certainly change is something that I deal with regularly, because anytime you want to move a business or yourself from where you are now to some future vision or some future place that you want to be, requires change.
Okay.
It all, just by definition. So change is constant. It's the one thing that we're all dealing with constantly. And so, yeah, absolutely. It's something I deal with clients all the time.
Okay. So you had said dealing with change, it's like being seasick. Is it because somebody's resisting change, which we all resist change? Is it that process that you take them through?
I think it's more of a sensation. Have you ever been seasick? I mean, really seasick?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And if anybody has experienced that, you know that you just want the boat to stop just for a minute. Will the captain just put the boat in park, right? Just put it in park and stop for just a minute. And what you know is that even if he did that, or she did that, the boat would still be rocking, right?
Mm-hmm.
The only way that you can really get the boat to stop rocking or get away from that rocking boat is to abandon the trip. And that's how I think about change in life as well. That the only way that we can avoid change is if we get off the journey, if we sit at home and do nothing. And even then, I think there's some change we can't avoid. But so we have to learn to accept it and live with it, and to do so within an exponentially changing world. And businesses in particular are having to deal with accelerated change.
Okay. And you say you can't manage change. It must be led. And this is more than just semantics. Can you go into detail about that?
Yeah, the words that we use are what develops the pictures in our minds, and it's what gives us the feelings or triggers feelings within us. And so different words actually bring up different pictures and different feelings. So if you think of the word manage, and you think about what kinds of pictures come up with that, what kinds of feelings come up with that. For me, it's a lot like a Keystone Cop trying to keep everything under control. You know, make everybody going in the right direction. It's a command and control type approach. And if you think about managing a situation, you keep it in control, right? Managing a budget, you keep it within limits. And with change isn't nice, neat, and easy. You can't control it. You can't contain it. You've got to let it move forward in progress. So I believe that even calling something change management has a sense, the effect or the outcome of keeping us stuck, of keeping us contained in that area. Whereas leading change is more like a guide leading a group up a mountain. So a group of mountain climbers. That's more the image that comes to mind for me, where there's a lot of forward motion in change.
Okay. And how do you get everybody to buy into change?
That's the $100,000 question, right? So I think there's several things, and that's always especially within businesses, that's the critical piece, because if people don't buy in, they're not going to make the changes that need to be made. So the first thing is, as a manager or a leader, you've got some change that you're going to introduce within your business. You and your management team, you and your leadership team have probably had time to discuss that, right? You kind of wrestled with some of the ideas, you've thought about it, you've had some time to get used to it. So when that change is introduced and cascaded down through the organization, you've got to give people that same opportunity. You got to give them some time to get used to it. And people go through, in a change process, they go through much the same processes as the grief process or the death and dying process that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross outlined. And there's those 5 stages. There's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, or some sense of that feeling of loss, and then acceptance. Some people will go through that process very quickly. Some people will go through it slower, just because of their personalities. If it's a big change, you've got to give people more opportunity, a longer period of time to get used to it, than if it's a little change. So,
and have you seen managers where they have made that decision, but they don't realize that they need to give their staff the same consideration, if you will?
Yeah, I see that all the time. I think one of the things that I just cringe when it happens is somebody calls me, and I've actually turned assignments like this down. They call and say, we just introduced all this change. We did all this restructuring. We have moved people around, moved teams around, moved their workplaces around, maybe done a reduction in force, maybe not. And they say, we want you to come in and do an hour presentation to motivate them. It's like, you got to be kidding. That's the last thing those people want to hear right then is motivation. They need some time. They need some time to get used to the idea. The second thing they need is they really need the opportunity to dialogue. They need the opportunity to express their concerns. They need the opportunity to ask questions, to put out ideas that they think might work better. So they need that time to dialogue back and forth. And that's one of the most critical pieces of buy-in, is giving people that opportunity.
Okay. And especially if you're blindsiding the person, or if the change from management came out of the blue, if you will, or the management had to keep things confidential for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is part of what happens. I think, it's oftentimes things do have to be confidential, and it's then seems like it came out of the blue to the employees. And I think acknowledging, telling people what you can tell them, and then acknowledging that there might be things that you can't tell them because of of legal issues. It happens a lot in publicly traded companies because
Oh, it
of
happens
the
a lot in
SEC
every
regulations.
organization, right? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But the need for the not to disclose everything is huge
Okay.
in publicly traded organizations. There's a lot of SEC requirements. So I think keeping staff as much in the loop as you can, and then once it's open, to give them as much opportunity to get used to it and to dialogue and debate as possible.
You know, before we started your blab, we were talking about Don Keller and Betsy Keys, and one of the elements of their workshop is really how do you create trust within an organization, so when a consultant or speaker or trainer such as yourself comes in, the staff is actually more in a trusting mode so they can speak more freely, and then somebody like you can actually get the work done.
Yeah, trust is actually one of the things I work a lot with clients around, especially when I'm doing team development work, because it's that foundational piece. If there's not a culture of trust, it's almost important to build a culture of teamwork. So that whole piece, and there's a couple of things on that and trust is huge in terms of accepting change too, right? So there's a couple of things with that. We are wired to trust people who are similar to us. We may have talked about that before. So helping people find similarities. And then another piece of that trust is helping people understand, accept, and appreciate differences and the strengths that those differences bring. And then a third part is making it okay, and this is critical to change as well, making it okay for people to speak out. If there's not if when somebody speaks out, they get their hand slapped, if they're ridiculed, if they're shut down when they try to speak out, when they try to give an idea or express a concern, that happens once or twice to people, and everybody goes underground.
Right. Very true. Very true.
You'll really have trouble getting change accepted in an environment like that.
Okay. So you had said, you know, it's not the staff's job to accept change. It's the manager, the supervisor, the CEO, to lead it. How do you help people, I guess, shift their mindset into realizing that's part of their responsibility?
It's a process. It's an ongoing process, and opportunities like this is part of it. That might be one of my soapboxes. Actually, is companies, if they would invest in some training for their leaders and managers in implementing change or leading change, as opposed to putting dollars into getting the team to accept change. Those dollars would be used a whole lot more effectively. And obviously, individual contributors, the staff, have to be open to change, and they own a piece of it as well. However, too often I find that too much expectations is placed on the staff to accept change without enough of the leadership process to actually help them do that.
Right. And with your background in healthcare systems and working in hospitals, this is a really big challenge because oftentimes, let's say a nurse may not see their, chief nurse, maybe every other day. It just depends on the shift. So how does that change start transcending throughout an organization in a, nice people skills friendly type of way?
Part of it is the message. Part of it is as a leadership team, really developing that message. Okay. What is the change and why do we need to do it? What's the vision that we can achieve if we make the change? And just as importantly, and I see this less frequently, I think, just as importantly is what's likely to happen if we don't change. Because too often what happens is people, even if their comfort zone isn't all that comfortable. So, a lot of times our comfort zones, I've got a picture of that I use sometimes, and it's a woman in a cardboard box, and she's all scrunched up and scrunched over and not in a comfortable position at all. And a lot of times our comfort zones aren't that comfortable. You may have experienced this as well. I had a friend, and I have on more than one occasion had a friend who really didn't like their jobs much, really did quite a bit of complaining about the job, but never really got out and did much about finding a new job. And then all of a sudden the universe puts them in a position where they have to find a new job, right? They get laid off, there's a reduction in force, and then they're all upset, and they're all of a sudden where they were becomes pretty and the future becomes stormy. So part of what we have to do as leaders is we have to help people see that the future can be sunny and bright and pretty, and that the present is going to be a little bit stormy if we don't make some changes.
Right. And it's that risk that people are really afraid of, right?
It is the risk. It's the unknown. It's the unknown. And the more that we can help people as leaders, the more we can make the future known. We can't 100% do that. The future's uncertain. But the more that we can help them, provide some certainties to them about what the future can look like, the more helpful it will be.
And that leads into the buy-in of how do you get people on board? It's almost like dragging a donkey through the desert, because everybody, including me, we resist change. And it's almost like once you stop resisting it, you might say, oh, things aren't so bad after all. Or you might say, yeah, this is pretty crappy. It is pretty bad, but you have to do it whether you like it or not.
Right. And one of the things that I encourage people, especially with organizational change within an organization where they may have to change the way they do their job or change who they report to or the reporting structures. When you have to change those things, I say, or they're faced with a change, and what happens is we make up a story. So let's say somebody is moved from one department to another. They're told that they're going to have a new job in a new department. And the story they make up is, oh, they're doing this because they don't value my skills. This is the last stop for me before I go out the door. They're just trying to get rid of me. That's the story that gets made up, right? But then ask yourself, when you get into those gloom and doom stories, or if you're a leader, ask your team this question. Ask your staff members this question. What else could be true? What else could be true? And write down 3 or 4 or 5 other things that could be true.
Okay.
It could be that they really value your skills and this department needs you in these skills, and they're grooming you for a promotion. As long as you're making up stories, and we all do it all the time,
right?
We might as well make up positive stories, good stories, rather than those doom and gloom stories.
Yep. And you did say, a big one of our reactions is it can go to the very, very negative. So, paint a different picture, paint a different reality, and, take a really positive spin on it.
And that's so critical, because when we focus on everything bad that could happen in the future and everything good that's in the present, it's really hard to take that step, right? When you're focused on everything good, it's really hard to take that step into the future, into focused on everything bad. So if you can flip those around and really think about what could be good in the future, what could be the benefits. Yeah, there may be some things that aren't good. There may be some things that are uncertain or unknown. There could be some risks. But what do you know is good? And then in another list of, what do you know you don't like in the current situation? And then focus on those two as opposed to what you love in the current situation and what you might hate in the future.
Right. Because people do invent stuff in their heads. There's no doubt about that. Yep. Yeah. And you had said a very critical part of buy-in is vision, dialogue, and time. But so often as a consultant, as a trainer, and a speaker, you see organizations, it's almost like the microwave society. They're trying to push it through, and they're not considering people's reaction time, I guess is the right word.
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, the leaders have typically had some time to get used to it. I also see something in, and this is very common, we all do it to some extent, that we almost fear if we give people an opportunity to discuss and to dialogue, that we're not going to be able to move forward with what we want to do or what our plan is. And that's not the case. That's not the case at all. Just because you let somebody give you input in a team setting or an organizational setting doesn't mean you have to do what they say, or that they even necessarily expect you to say everything that they recommend. Just having that opportunity to have their say makes them more willing to go forward. And then another key, go ahead. Another key piece in terms of getting change accepted within an organization is, as leaders, think about what needs to be done. Be clear on what you're trying to accomplish or the outcome you're trying to accomplish. Also be really clear on why it's necessary. And then engage the team in developing the how. They're much closer to it. The action plan. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And by empowering people and getting that dialogue going, you are really helping them craft what that change is going to look like rather than just being dictated to.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things, some of the research has shown that people are the happiest and the most engaged and do the best work when they have a perception of control, that they have some sense of control over their destiny, and they have the sense of making forward progress. So that control piece for change is really important. So that's another piece to really look at as you're planning change. What can you give people at each level control over?
Okay.
Rather than trying to dictate everything.
Very true. Now, you have said, most people, we know that we should be flexible and open-minded and adaptable, but a lot of people, number one, they don't know how to do that. And number two, they could be absolutely afraid depending on what their corporate environment is like, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a matter of being able to change perspectives. It's a matter of that question of what else could be true is a critical question throughout a change process, because that's part of what helps people start looking at other perspectives. And that's what leaders need to help people do, is to see different perspectives, to see the whole picture, kind of that whole view of it.
Because if they don't take other perspectives into consideration, number one, they could be missing out on some really good information. But number two, if they're just staying in their own little box, there becomes a level of, I'm not going to say the word dysfunctionality, but it makes it a lot harder for change to occur.
And actually, dysfunction probably isn't too strong of a word. That dysfunction occurs when the change process is pushed on somebody or is forced on them without giving them the ability to be part of it. And certainly, you can't it's not realistic or not reasonable in many instances to let all the staff be involved in all processes of the pieces of change process. However, one of the critical things to do is to really look at where can they be involved? What does management have to decide? And what can they allow staff to be part of? Okay, very good. So another element that you talk about is to effectively lead change, management must help people let go of the past and focus forward. Now you're becoming a psychologist. Well, I'm not claiming to be a psychologist, but people accepting change and being able to move forward with change absolutely has to do with the mind, right? Because so much of the resistance is in our head. Right. So much of that resistance isn't about reality. it's about our reality, but it's not about objective reality. It's about what we've made up. And so for people to be able to see the picture of what can be and to hold that image of what can be is really critical for a leader to do. At the same time, helping people recognize that their comfort zones, as I mentioned a minute ago, their comfort zones aren't so comfortable.
Right.
And there's some, there were some things they didn't like about it. So how can they take some of what they didn't like or get some of what they wanted in their old position or in the old way of doing things in the new one?
Mm-hmm. Now, you also sent me a bullet point that says, there is a simple question you can ask to help yourself and others accept change. What is that question? And
that's that question that we've asked a couple of times now, is what else could be true? What else could be true? You know, when we get these, it's all about, again, the stories we make up. And as a manager, as a leader, getting people to articulate what their concerns are. Sometimes we want to shut those out, right? It's like, oh, I don't want to hear what the concerns are. I don't want to hear the bad stuff. I don't want to hear, you know, the other day somebody was telling me about a situation, a client was telling me about a situation where she had asked a couple of questions about a new way of implementing things, a new procedure. It happened to be within a school district, a new procedure within a school district. And she asked a couple of questions about it. I wasn't there at the time, but she asked a couple of questions, and her perception was that they didn't want to hear the questions. They shut her down, said, you need to be more of a team player and you need to be more positive. So what do you think she did? She totally withdrew, right?
I was going to say, she can go one of two ways.
Yeah, she totally withdrew. Said, okay, they don't care about what I have to say. Mm-hmm. It's not going to make any difference. That's the other thing is so why fight it? Mm-hmm. So managers and leaders, they too often jump in and shut people down as being resistant or as being not a team player, when really if they give people the chance to express their concerns, once the manager or leader understands what their the staff member's concerns are, they can help them walk through it. They can help them change that perspective. But without taking time to understand where staff are coming from or where somebody else is coming from, anybody else in the process is coming from, you can't help them through it. You can't help them move from, I like to look at Niagara Falls, and if you've been to Niagara Falls, you know that the U.S. side, this falls from the U.S. side, looks significantly different than the falls from the Canadian side. And so how can that manager help somebody move from the U.S. side to the Canadian side or vice versa? How can they do that? The only way to do that is to understand the picture they currently have. The story that they're currently telling. Once they understand, once the leader understands the story the person's telling, then they can help them change it.
Got it. What are some of the trends that you see in your work impacting, either today's workforce or the companies?
So one of the things is the speed of change. There's so much change going on all the time. And I think companies in some industries are affected more than that by others. But the technology and the speed of change in technology is affecting every company, not just technology companies. So I think that's a huge issue. There's a lot of industries that experience regulatory changes. Healthcare is one of those that it is experiencing a lot of external change that is really requiring hospitals, doctors, everybody involved to make some significant internal changes to deal with the external changes that are being thrust upon them. So you've got those external changes. You've got mergers and acquisitions, which are always huge in terms of a company in terms of the changes within a company and what that brings about, and the fears and the concerns and cultural issues. So all of those are big issues in terms of change. And then, one of the big changes in the workforce is the change in terms of the millennials as the baby boomers retire and the millennials come into leadership positions. And that's changing the culture of organizations significantly. And that's an area where, people can, the today's leaders of organizations can sit and complain about the millennials. And I hear quite a bit of that going on. I, by the way, think the millennials get a bad rap. That's probably for a different discussion for a different blab. However, they can sit there and moan and groan about the millennials and how, they don't want to work and they're entitled and whatever else they have to say. The fact is, I read yesterday or day before that the millennials are now the biggest number of people in the workforce are millennials. They outnumber baby boomers. And the Gen X generation, so this is a force of change within organizations, the Gen X generation was a small generation in terms of numbers. So and the baby boomers were obviously a big generation, right? That's why they were called baby boomers. So what you've got is this huge amount of knowledge that's leaving organizations, retiring, going out to do something on their own. You've got that mid-level that's not as big as what that needs to be replaced. So the millennials are going to come into leadership positions most likely more quickly than the Gen X generation did, because just the numbers, the way the numbers work out, which the millennials will love.
Well, and the baby boomers just stuck around longer.
Yes, that's another factor with it. So that's another change that's really facing businesses, and one that I believe leaders are going to have to very quickly, especially leaders of all organizations really, are going to have to very quickly come to terms with.
Okay, perfect. And the great thing is you actually, through your workshops, your trainings, and your seminars, you can help guide clients into what I call, you're really helping them usher into the global information age, because a lot of the companies that you are working with or the industries that you target, they are operating on the industrial age methodologies, but we are not in that time anymore. We're in the shared economy, people are sharing cars. It's a different mindset that you are now helping your clients transition into, correct?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The industrial age management approach is not what we need for leadership in the economy and the world that we live in today. However, it's been a little bit slow. We've been a little bit slow to evolve from that, and for a lot of reasons, some of them very good reasons. The other piece is that we as people, as human beings, have not evolved as quickly as the world has either, in terms of some of our responses and some of our more hardwiring aspects of our neurology, which again is probably a topic for another blab. But so there's all kinds of changes, and certainly that need to, the millennials are going to force, I believe, they're going to force that change to a new type of leadership. They will, as they become more and more a force within the business world. Because if you think about it, depending on which numbers you look at, the leading edge, or the oldest edge of the millennials, are in their mid-30s right now.
Right.
The lagging edge, or the youngest edge, is kind of 18-ish right now, 19. That's kind of 17. You can't find one single range that everybody agrees to in terms of what the different generations are. But so that's a 17-year gap there.
There's a lot of information that somebody can learn over 17 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Well, as we wrap up, where can viewers learn more about you and your offerings?
My website is www.strategies-by-design.com. So STRATEGIES, strategies hyphen BY by hyphen design, DESIGN.com.
Okay.
LinkedIn.
And do you have a Twitter follow, a LinkedIn followers?
LinkedIn, I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. It's just my name, Julie Chance. Action Strategies by Design on Facebook is Facebook page. And then Twitter is actually Julie C, as in cat, and then Chance. So it's my name, Julie Chance, with the middle initial C in the middle.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you would like to book Julie for a corporate engagement or an annual trade show or conference, please contact me, Kim Tracy, at maxwelljames.net, and we will schedule our next blab with you soon. Thank you so much.
Great, Kim. Thanks for having me. Lots of fun.
Absolutely.
As always.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.